Hello guys, welcome to Sociocultural Studies Contemporary Issue Screencast. Today's focus is going to be on modern technology in sport. Now, I think, we're very lucky really to kind of live in an age where sport has become so entertaining, and a big part of that, I suppose, is due to modern technology. Now, what we have to look at here is the specification looks huge, but it actually isn't. A lot of it's repeated, but just needs slightly different examples. So you have a look at the first part of the spec. We have to have a look at specifically how modern technology has kind of improved elite performance. And secondly, how it's kind of linked to kind of participation. So what things now are there that allow within technology that we can use as both general participation in the public and also elite performance levels that can really enhance performance. On top of that, we're going to have a look at kind of how modern technology in sport has linked to fair outcomes. So refereeing, particularly, we'll have a look at those. And then finally, we'll have a look at how it's contributed to our entertainment. And as you can see here, that very rare, but you've got the specification really is what you have to learn. Every single bit on this will be in a mark scheme to an exam. So these are the bits you're on. You do not need to copy this down. We'll go through these and start to look at how we can kind of condense this information into kind of a manageable chunks. So let's have a look then. First one. Extent to which modern technology then has really impacted, I suppose it affected positively sport. So at the elite level. Let's have a look then. First thing, facilities. Now, the change in facilities for elite athletes has gone twofold. You look back and think, if you were thinking about a kind of rugby pre-season training 15 years ago, you're looking at somebody kind of going out running around the field, running up hills. Same football maybe 20 years ago, 25 years ago. Now you look at you hear stories of kind of the Welsh national rugby team and the kind of level they're going to, cryotherapy, and also a good example that you could use cryotherapy if you wanted to is like hypoxic chambers. And I think this is quite a good one to use for us because we obviously in kind of ergogenic aids have to talk about the concept of a hypoxic chamber or intermittent hypoxic training. So we're looking at that concept where you're kind of mirroring kind of the hypoxic conditions of altitude. And these are done in chambers or labs where people go in and train in these kind of chambers to try and get those kind of performance benefits that are associated with intermittent hypoxic training. So that would be an example of facilities that elite athletes use to kind of really try and increase their red blood cell count to allow them to perform aerobically for longer. So, there's hypoxic chamber in the Welsh Rugby Union training facility alongside a cryotherapy suite. So you can think of these examples now, facilities that are really aimed at the top level to improve performance. You're not going to see a hypoxic chamber in your local sports centre gym. So this is very much at the elite level. Next one, access. Now, access within modern sport or elite level sport has increased. So what we've got now, and you need to think about access with regard to kind of how it impacts kind of disability sport. So you look now and think if somebody was in a situation that they were an amputee, 20, 30 years ago, that would mean that, it would be wheelchair sport or nothing. Now what we have is this kind of idea behind a prosthetic limb. Okay, so prosthetic limbs that can be used. You think of the examples of the blade runners as they're called, allowing them to really perform at the top level. Going on, monitoring of exercise. So what we also have is the kind of technology at the elite level. The ability to monitor performance has gone through the roof. And when you think about it now, you look back, if you see pictures for professional football players, rugby players, for example, training, certainly pre-season training, after games, you see them with like kind of little bib-like things, and what they actually are GPS, trackers. So each player will have one of these on. They kind of come round in like a bib-type shape, from sometimes outside their kind of shirts, not their match shirts, but certainly training shirts. And this is looking as a GPS tracker to track exactly the kind of amount of high-intensity sprints, the distance covered in a game that could be really useful for coaches when analysing performance. We go on from there then, equipment. If you think of the elite level sport, equipment has come on unbelievably. So if you look here now, I'll give you an example of equipment that can aid performance. So you've got things such as force plates. You could be looking at things such as kind of carbon fiber kind of tennis rackets, or you could be looking at kind of cycling bikes. Whatever your example is that you think you could link to, I'll put this as a force plate because I think this is quite a good one to use. Again, I'm trying to keep things linked to equipment that you might use in a biomechanics specification. Year one, we looked at force plates as kind of a biomechanical equipment. So that might be a good one just because it might get your brain thinking back to force plates that we looked at in year 1 biomechanics. Okay, going on from there then, the final thing at the elite level modern technology has affected is safety. Okay, so if we have a look at safety here, I thought a good one to be used here, nice and easy for everyone, is a cricket helmet and pads. If you're more kind of interested in rugby, you might be looking at things such as gum shields or kind of scrum caps, whichever one you want to use. Okay, so there's examples. That's how it's selected the elite level sport. Now what we need to do is we have to apply these key things here, but instead of at the elite level, we now need to start looking at general participation. So if we have a look across now, those keywords that we've used there are exactly the same, but now our examples have to be about the general public and participation levels rather than elite level analysis and performance. So let's have a look then. First up, let's have a look at facilities. So for facilities, a really good thing now. You think, and I know a number of you will be involved in this kind of stuff, but you will play in kind of 5-a-side football leagues. Some people at Worcester Warriors, for example, on the pitch there. A perfect example of kind of these 5, 6, 7-a-side football competitions that are run. And this is due to technology. And the technology we're talking about here, of course, is 3G football pitches, 4G football pitches. This means that more people can participate because we live in Britain. The weather is not good, and also, of course, you've got the dark nights in the winter, and floodlights could be another example. So just think of something on this. It might be really kind of linked to yourself if you actually take part in these type of things. On top of that, when we're talking about access with regard to general participation, we're talking about, rather than kind of prosthetic limbs for elite athletes, we're talking about kind of this idea that disabled people can actually take part in kind of physical activity. So, for example, I'll put an example here as a disabled swimming pool hoist. Okay, so for people in wheelchairs, they can actually go to swimming pools and they can be hoisted into the water via this mechanism here. So that's a good one to use, I think, for that. But of course, if you're struggling to make connections with that, maybe think about keep that idea of disability kind of participation. If you think at gyms, for example, there might be a disability ramp that allows wheelchair access into the gym or fitness centre that is needed to be used. Okay, so if we go on from that, monitoring of exercises at the elite level, we're looking at GPS tracking, looking at those high intensity sprints or distance covered in a game. However, monitoring of exercise for us in the general public or to increase participation has grown massively. You know, and some of you might have heart rate monitors, but I think the most popular kind of tracker or monitoring device would be the Fitbit, okay? And I think Fitbit's really good because it gives you that kind of extra motivation, doesn't it? That's not a new brand, by the way. I've just put that down there just to remind you that kind of by having the ability to monitor exercise via devices or technology such as a Fitbit, this can really increase your motivation. On top of that, if we start to think about equipment that could really aid kind of participation, we could look at things such as kind of running shoes. Now, a lot of people take up running. You know, we've got really popular kind of national initiative for athletics, the Park Run, for example, and it's amazing. As soon as you start getting into this kind of running, even if it's for just participation, just to keep yourself fit, you start to think about getting equipment that is specific to that sport. So, for example, tailored running shoes would be a real example of that. I mean, you know, there's a shop down in Worcester, particularly from where we live, and I can't think what it's called now, but they have specific kind of treadmills on there where you kind of go in there and get the tailored running shoes, particularly to your feet, so you can test them on the treadmill in the shop, and that is an example of equipment that allows participation to increase. I think running shoes is a really good one because running is one of the most popular exercise types for people who want to increase participation or start to participate in sport. Going on from there then, safety. I think this is a good one because you can use it for both participation and performance. So we can keep cricket helmet and pads there as a double. Now, it's quite important to just kind of get this into our head. Technology increasing is fantastic for elite performance, but also participation. Quite important, though, we have a look at it and think, doesn't always increase participation, because this kind of stuff here, and I'm looking here now, if I was just to pose this question to you now, can you think of how something like this actually could lead to a decrease in participation? And just think what things could maybe put people off with regard to this. So if I started off then, and this is the kind of the other part of the question you could get, the extent to which modern technology has limited or reduced participation. Well, of course, when technological advances come in, okay, if you think about it away from sport, if you're thinking about iPads, for example, they're they're expensive, and I recently bought one of these for someone. I couldn't believe it. You're kind of looking at somewhere between 150, 200 quid for the good ones, and you think that when the cost of these modern technologies to increase participation can put people off. I mean, another example, there's things such as heart rate monitors, and they can be really, really expensive now. For example, some gyms run classes where you have to have certain kind of heart rate technology called MyZone or MyFitnessZone. You put it in as a heart rate monitor, and of course, you're paying a lot of money. For example, the club I'm talking about, David Lloyd, you're paying kind of somewhere between £60 and £100 to go there. But on top of that, to have the technology, you're looking at somewhere between another £100 just to get a bout, the kind of that MyZone heart rate bout, just to take part. So the cost can be real debilitating to some people with regard to participation. Going on from there then, not only is the cost something here, but modern technology can actually lead us to decreased participation just because of the nature of it. So for example, there are a range of alternatives now to physical activity in sport, and things such as segways. I don't know if anybody's had a go on these. And these are examples of things where you're moving, but your body is doing absolutely nothing to aid that movement. So you may as well be in a car. And you look at that and think these range of alternatives with regard to technological advances, such as a Segway, can actually lead to a reduced participation. Now, what would be really good now is if you could have a quick think, if you can maybe bring into the lesson some other ones, some other examples of how technology has rose. I'm sure you can think of things that has led to people not taking part in sport. And I hear students talking about it all the time, what they're doing at home with regard to technology. Going on from there then, I think it'd be a good chance now, if we have a look at this, just to see what you've covered so far, the extent to which modern technology has affected elite level sport and general participation. If I put down this acronym now, I think this works quite well. Technology has increased elite level sports people's chance of fame, of fames. Technology makes them better, increase their chance of fames. If I put those down there now, pause it. Can you remember what that is? And then can you apply to the example you're seeing here, just as a little memory task just before you come into the lesson. Okay, so that's that. Let's go on to our last little objective for the screencast then. So, the final thing we have to look at is kind of the impact of modern technology with regard to fair outcomes. This is a huge area, really, isn't it? Certainly the World Cup last year for football, I've seen major advances in that sport, which is pretty much travelling a long time behind cricket and rugby. So let's have a look then. What are the first one? Now, the first advance in modern technology with regard to fair outcomes is better timing of devices. So there's something called fully automatic timing. Any athletes listening to screencast will be aware of this. So specific timing devices in athletics that kind of take it down to a hundredth of a second, so you get really kind of accurate timing. That's the name of it. I'll show you a picture of it in the lesson. On top of timing devices, because you've got to think, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, you've got people on the side of a track timing it and stopping it. Okay, now you've got these fully automatic timing devices which make it way more accurate. Okay, going on from there then, you also have increased accountability of officials. So now what we have is, due to modern technology and things like video assistant referees in football, television match officials in rugby, it increases the accountability. They now know their performance has to be high. They have a responsibility because they can't just make up things that they've seen. They have to be as accurate as possible because they know that there's going to be a video version or video referees checking whether they're right or not. Okay, going on from there then. As a result of technology as well within refereeing, of course, there is more accurate decision making. Nothing comes better now with regard to football, for example, goal line technology. The decisions are more accurate, and as soon as the referee looks on that watch and sees it, just a bit too late for Frank Lampard, but it's good that it's here now. Going on from there, it helps with improved detection of foul play. So, for example, now looking back at video replays can now allow kind of sightings or retrospective bans in sports where the referee might have missed it. So, they can go in, have a look at it, and they can be cited or banned for longer. For example, football, rugby, I'm thinking of. there. So foul play being kind of, misconduct such as biting, football or rugby, I suppose, punching off the ball, and people can see that and then ban them. On top of that, this is really important, there is improved detection of doping. Now, we've looked at kind of World Anti-Doping Association, and as a result of kind of doping, technology has improved massively. So we've got WADA accredited labs that look at blood and urine testing. Okay, so that's those. If we have a quick look at the disadvantages then, how can it lead to a decrease in fair outcomes? The first one, I'll put these on there. If you just make a note of them, we'll talk about them in the lesson. Thank you very much.